So with that said, let me introduce our speaker. This is the part that you've all been waiting for. Babak Tafreshi is the founder of the World at Night program, a science journalist and National Geographic photographer, taking images that merge art, culture, and science by bridging earth and sky. His work reconnects people with the night sky and the values of natural nights. For his global contribution in this field, he received the 2009 Leonard Nilsson Award, the world's most recognized award for scientific photography at the time. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Babak Tafreshi.
Hello everyone, thank you for coming, thank you for waiting for our small technical problem here. Usually I start about the world at night photography by showing some examples of how the night sky looks like around the planet. But I have changed this presentation today because the audience here, I have added a few more pictures of Iran, because I can imagine there are a good number of Iranians in this room. Just to have a rough estimate, who are non-Iranian? Oh, okay, so like probably 30%. And Toronto is dominated by Persian community. This is my first time in Toronto. We have family members here, so it's actually a family trip. I'm here with my wife, parents, and our little son, Aban, 2 years old, clapping hand at the end of the salon. And but I thought of, since I'm coming to Toronto for the first time, make a last-minute arrangement with the association here to do the talk. Thanks to two good friends of mine, Armand and Ada, who are one of them are here, did the initial coordination for this lecture today. But I hope to return to Toronto more often because I'm not that far in Boston. It's drivable or a short flight. The picture you're seeing is a view in the morning sky as the moon is setting over Rio de Janeiro, Brazil. During this time, thousands of birds, these are about 2 to 3 meters in wingspan, are coming back from the nearby islands to the mainland Rio, exactly at sunrise. And exactly at sunrise was the time of moonset. The full moon is usually rising exactly at sunset and setting at sunrise the next morning. Across the planet, now we are in Himalayas, Nepal. We're looking at neighboring peaks of Mount Everest. The first one is Lucy, and the other one, which you're looking at right now, is a very dramatic mountain. It's one of the most iconic mountains of Himalayas, known as Amadabla. Interesting to climb and very challenging, of course, but very prominent in the Himalayan range, as you can see it on the way to the Everest base camp. Everything is illuminated in this picture by moonlight. A lot of people frequently ask me if I edit my images, and let me clarify this at the very beginning of this talk. Most of my images are single exposures or single exposure panorama. Although I'm capable of editing my images, that means manipulate by adding different exposures or making HDRs, I like to challenge myself with single exposure photograph because I think photography is based on 4 main elements: art, technique, story, and moment. By adding different exposures to one picture, remove that moment value of the photograph. I'm not against photo composites, but I prefer personally to continue with single exposures. Some of the images are impossible to create with single exposures, such as long start rates. At the moment with digital camera, you have to stack a number of images to get a very long, several hours of exposure, which I will mention when we look at some of these. but most of them are single exposure photographs, which I have started during my teenagehood with film cameras, and then continued with these much more sensitive digital cameras which we are using today. The same scene, a bit later. Now the moon is setting over the horizon just behind me. These are the last rays of the moon shining over Amadablam as one of the interesting celestial objects in the sky known as Behind the Star Cluster is rising over the peak. So this is the cluster I'm talking about, and planet Mars is right on the shoulder of Amadablam. Many of these are captured in a time-lapse video. As I add these frames into a video, you can see how the progress of moonset or moonrise, Milky Way rise is happening in the sky. Night-escape photography is not all about nighttime and darkness. We take pictures right at sunset and sunrise as well. This is the shadow of the highest mountain in the entire Pacific Ocean, known as Mauna Kea, which has been the place of the struggle in the past few decades between astronomers and local people, who regard this mountain as the most sacred for traditional Hawaiian beliefs. So it's a matter of land ownership. Astronomers need this place to do front-edge science observation. It's one of the best places on the planet to observe the night sky with large telescopes. And at the same time, it's a sacred land, and they don't want any more telescopes. So this has been a struggle. Some Hawaiian blocked the road for about 30 days, just a few months ago. And astronomers were not able to go to the mountain for 30 days. Every second of this observatory is immensely valuable. So this has been really a major struggle. And what you're looking at is the shadow of Mauna Kea right at sunrise. Now we are in mainland US, one of the national parks in Utah. Southwest US has been known as a paradise for stargazers and astrophotographers because it's rather dry, a lot of dramatic scenery for your foreground. Milky Way is boldly visible in a good season, and at the same time, it's quite accessible. Across the planet now to the south, we are in Australia, Victoria, not far from Melbourne, only 3 hours drive. We are in a very unusual place known as Great Ocean Road and Campbell National Park. So I'm looking at the southern end of the national park. The next landmass after this interesting rock formation is Antarctica. So there is nothing between here and Antarctica. That's why the southern horizon is pretty dark. What you see over there is some towns not too far away. Southern Cross, the constellation we know as a symbol of the southern skies, right in the center. There are many dark areas around the planet where stargazers frequently visit to do observation or astrophotography. This is one of them in California, Sierras. There are many of them in Canada too, especially in the state of Alberta, but also more towards the north. Canada has a huge number of dark sky areas, and in fact it's the #1 country in amount of dark sky parks registered at the moment. But since I've not explored Canada that much, I don't have many images. We have 2 members, active members in Canada, taking pictures for the Board at Night group, which I'm coordinating and directing since the beginning. And those members are responsible to take pictures of the dark sky parks in the country. Now let's have a closer look at the same scene with the second camera. You're looking down on the water, the reflection of the Milky Way on the water in a very still moment without any wind. As soon as the wind starts, then the image becomes quite blurry. I was also surprised that this is a single exposure. I couldn't believe my eyes looking at this picture on the screen of the camera, but this is thanks to a new generation of cameras which are very sensitive. This camera is an astro-modified one, means one of the filters in front of the sensor is removed. Therefore, we can capture more of the red end of the spectrum where most of these nebulosity are shining. So I'm using one of these cameras in order to capture such object in the sky. This area, more intensity of the Milky Way. This is Nikon D810A, and there are Canon equivalent of that, or some people just modify their cameras by third-party companies. You can modify any camera. And it's only a 15-second exposure, very high ISO. Tracked, for those of you who know about astrophotography a bit more, this is on a star tracker device for 15 seconds. So if you look very close from where I'm standing, you will see the mountains are slightly blurred because the tracker is following the stars. You're looking at the center of the galaxy. This is the galactic core in constellations Sagittarius and Scorpion. And the star on the right side with a lot of colors around it is Antares, the heart of the Scorpion. Across the planet again, in Chile. I was here a few days ago. This picture is from another trip, but I go to Chile frequently because Atacama Desert is probably the best paradise for astronomers. It's kind of hell to any other species because it's so dry. You don't see much signs of life across Atacama unless in some rare areas where the water existing, but it's such a dramatic landscape. It's an amazing location for astronomers because it's not only dry with more than 300 clear nights per year. It's high altitude, that means transparent sky, and there is a parameter very important for astronomers called seeing, and it's perfectly set in some of the mountains in Atacama Desert. That's why many observatories are located either in Hawaii Islands, such as Mauna Kea or Haleakala, or over here in the Atacama Desert. These are the two hottest spots of observatories and astronomers. Let's have a look how a night develops here in the Atacama Desert. Sunset to starry sky. With the Licancabur volcano right on the border of Chile with Bolivia. The volcano is about 6,000 meters. Sky at the beginning is rather green due to a phenomenon known as air glow, natural emission of the Earth's upper atmosphere. The Milky Way is about to come. We're going to have a moonrise on this night as well, and you will see how much captured or addressed by police officers in almost every country. But most of them are very happy ending and friendly, and because everyone, almost everyone has, in their instinct, has some connection to the night sky. So as soon as you share that passion that I'm here for photography of the stars, they usually understand. It doesn't work all the time, but most of the time. So there were a few times I had some serious trouble, but not the rest. And these are not trouble. They were my friend. A couple of them were guides. Another one is actually an astronomer in Algeria. He's dressed up in a traditional way. And we were traveling in southern Algeria in the heart of Sahara, Tassili National Park, very far from any source of civilization in a way. It was 300 kilometers away from the first village where we were camping. It was late in the season on assignment for their National Observatory project. We were looking for the site, also some neighboring areas for imaging for their PR activity. And it was so late in the season that daytime temperature reached about 60 degrees Celsius. At nighttime it was easily above 35 at night, so it was quite unpleasant temperature-wise, but the landmarks were really stunning. It was funny because at this image I'm showing constellation Scorpion rising. After this shot I went over here, I was shooting these rocks, and there was a couple of scorpions in my field of view. With the scorpion over. Later in the night, one of the darkest night skies I've ever seen. Not necessarily the best night sky for astronomers. Darkness is just one parameter that we need. but pretty dark to the eye, very unusual experience because now we are living in a world with a lot of light pollution. About 80% of human population nowadays are affected by light pollution. That means they're usually in places where the Milky Way is no longer visible, completely vanished by city lights or any source of light which is shining to the horizon or to the sky. Light pollution is not the light we basically need. It is excessive light we send to the horizon and to the sky. Extra light we don't need, but carelessly is pointed to the horizon or to the sky. And I will talk about that later just a bit more. The Ward at Night started in 2007. It was my teenagehood dream to do this project, but it took me quite some time to start it because I was identifying the best people on the planet to join the team, and also I needed an umbrella organization, which was Astronomers Without Borders, which we managed to start that together with my friend Mike Simmons in California. Then in 2009, Tuan became part of International Year of Astronomy and joined UNESCO and International Astronomical Union. We managed to do exhibits in over 30 countries. And deliver some of the messages. First one is, of course, that we all live under one sky. It's very simple, and we share this slogan with Astronomers Without Borders. They do an event in April called Global Astronomy Month, which is the world's largest public outreach astronomy program at the moment. Another approach of Tuan is include cultural and historic landmarks in the foreground, because then not only it shows you the diversity of cultures with one sky above us, but better gives a better bridge between general public and the night sky. If you only show a picture of the Milky Way without anything in the foreground, this is an isolated part of the universe to general eyes. It's almost like just a lab for astronomers. It's not relevant to daily life, but as soon as you include a familiar landmark, could be a UNESCO World Heritage landmark in your country or your area, then people can relate to the night sky as well. And remember, night sky is not only a laboratory to astronomers, but a part of our life. Very essential to many species on the planet, in fact. So this project is a bridge between art, humanity, and science. It's not necessarily about astronomy. As the moon rises over Nepal, over these Buddhist temple in Bhaktapur of Nepal, within a few hours, you will see the same thing in the Middle East. A few hours later, you will see this over Europe. So the same window connects us all together. And this is one of the messages we usually try to deliver in the exhibits. Could be a digital exhibition. This one was in Austria. We did it twice in Linz. This is in Science Center in Germany. Our colleague in Germany, the Tuan coordinator, Bernhard Meiser and Pascal Demy, they take a portable planetarium with the Ward at Night show to very unusual locations. Anywhere you can imagine. This is the group, the active Canadian member is here, Alan Dyer. We also have a member, Yuichi Takasaka, from the west side of Canada. It's not too far from Vancouver. And back to the story of being addressed by police, this was a very good example of that. This is Paris, the Champs-Élysées, and the Arc. Almost about 11 p.m. When you're shooting with a telephoto and you want to combine the moon with a landmark, without, of course, photoshopping that. So you have a very small area to align yourself. If you move 10 meters away, this alignment is gone. My alignment was unfortunately in the middle of the street. So I was doing that until the police came. And the French police addressed me that what I'm doing in the middle of the night, in the middle of the street. And I shared that story and it worked. display support. So this was the time lapse, but then I have a closer view of the actual shot I was looking for. And these are not the stars up here. These are the top of the towers in the modern part of Paris, La Défense. And this image is telling you those four elements that I'd like to present in the images. The story with the police, of course, the moment, the technique in order to capture this in a single exposure, and composition. Some of the images are very abstract looking. I was walking down in a canyon in Persian Gulf, the island of Pesh. This is the largest island in the Persian Gulf. Very critical and a strategic place. 90% of the island is naturally protected, but it's not far from all the problems in the Persian Gulf area, because this is right at the beginning of Hormuz Strait, a small, narrow area where most of the oil is transported. But the island is far from all these hassle because it's naturally protected. So I was walking down in the canyon, looking upward, until I suddenly saw this flying swan. The silhouette of the canyon looked like exactly like a swan flying, and Pleiades is right here. This is a connection to the other message of the word at night, that night sky is an essential element of life on this planet. Many species are very much related to dark skies. As soon as you introduce light pollution, they're gone. And one of the major drops we have seen in life on the planet is on the insects. More than half of the insects are gone in the past few decades. And nobody exactly knew what is going on. Is it climate change? Is it air pollution? Or is it light pollution? In the last few years, there's more and more evidence that light pollution is a major contributor to the drop of insects, especially bees. And you know that this is a major issue with losing bees, and you lose a good portion of our life cycle. And this is not a guess. It's established science at the moment. People are working that in Europe and US on finding a better connection between light pollution, especially the white blue LEDs, which are now becoming more popular, they're a bigger problem, and the drop of insects population, and many other things. This was a family trip we did recently. I had a lecture in annual program in Maine called Astronomy Retreat, where we do a stargazing program, an astrophotography workshop in northern Maine. And we were staying here with my family for a few nights, and it was amazing at the middle of the night. These are some of the sounds that we never hear in city life. So these are loons just talking to each other. Loons are divers, the birds which are diving very deep in water. And they're very dominant in many parts of Northern America. But most people are not familiar with this sound anymore. Because as soon as you introduce light pollution, they're not going to stay on that lake. This is a so-called Persian saying. I didn't find a reliable source to it, but everywhere you look, this is known as a Persian saying. Night hides a world, but reveals a universe. And I totally agree with that, because at night everything looks dark, eerie, and uneasy to most people, because we are not nocturnal species. We are not really quite sharp at night time. When you're walking out for the first time under the stars, you're kind of lost. You're away from your home. But after a few try, give it a few try, and then you realize you could be addicted to the night, in fact. You could Be someone who realizes the night sky as your second home. In the Sierra Nevada, California, in fall, now we are in the same area. This is a very recent time-lapse video with a striking moonrise. Kilimanjaro at night with two clouds in the sky. These are our celestial neighbors, our galactic neighbors, large and small Magellanic clouds. Each one of them is an actual galaxy. You can see with the eye of the eye, but they're not visible from cities. As soon as you get away from the light, these two galaxies are visible in the southern sky or anywhere around the equator. This place is right on the equator, border of Kenya and Tanzania, the roof of Africa. Now, this is the roof of the Middle East. The highest mountain in the Middle East is located in northern Iran, only 70 kilometers away from the capital, Tehran. It's Mount Damavand, the highest live volcano in the entire Asia. Still live, but not quite active, thanks to it, because it's really close to the capital. The image is a combination, using a combination of sources for light. One is moonlight, which is illuminating the sky in blue. The other is a road connecting Tehran to the Caspian Sea. So those are the light of the passing cars illuminating the rock. Now the mountain, now we are in Himalayas. This time you have to view Mount Everest. The one on the left is Mount Everest. Is not that photogenic from this side of the Himalayas. It's much more prominent from the Tibetan side. Bright star Capella is using. Most of my images are without any filter on the lens. This one has a cross filter or a star filter on the lens. Therefore, you see these spikes to feature this bright star Capella. Grand Canyon in moonlight, the largest canyon on Earth, not the deepest, but the largest. Yosemite National Park in California, this is about 1 hour of exposure, and it's not a single exposure. So I could do a 1 hour single exposure or break these to 60 1 minute or 120 30 seconds. The advantage of breaking these to shorter exposures and combining them together later on is that your camera doesn't get that noisy. If you continue using that sensor for a single frame, the final image can become really noisy. So at the moment with the technology, you can go up to 40 minutes, but not longer without getting too much noise. In the film time, it was of course mainly a single exposure for long star treks. A recent trip to Prague with New Moon over this World Heritage area. In central Tehran, this is the highest communication tower in the country, and it has a funny story because we were invited for a family dinner, and my family relatives were cooking kebab on top of the building. And I went to the roof. I had some calculation for the area because it was an interesting new moon. So I mentioned to my wife that the place we are going to visit your grandmother, but exactly on top of the roof is the perfect location for a laundry. and the tower. So as his uncle was making the kebab, I was shooting along. So sometimes you have to combine family occasion with your job, which is very nice. And this was the final result, a long exposure of the moonset behind Milad Communication Tower, made about 10 to 11 years ago. Some of the images are not showing any star because they're more about the Earth. This is a light festival in Portugal. There are many light festivals around the world, and this is a good example that tells us light is used by us not only for safety and security, but also for character. It could be character of a city, like Las Vegas. It could be used for entertainment. It could be used for art. And it could be used for advertisement. So light has many different aspects. And when you think about light pollution, you should address all these together. Some of them are very sensitive. For example, you cannot turn off lights in Las Vegas because it's part of nature, part of the character of the city. But you can reduce that, of course. This is a very good example of light pollution. A power station in northern Arizona, near the town of Bend, near the town of Page, and it's a source of power, but losing most of its power towards the sky, but electricity. So this is a good example of light pollution because you show what is happening to the clouds above. This is a very dark area, so the only source of light illuminating the cloud is the power station. And most of these are completely needless because you do not need to point the light towards the sky or horizon. You do not need to illuminate it so heavily. Any plane will see that power station with only a fraction of this light. Away from lights, in Maine, during the stargazing program we have in summer, an amateur astronomer is using his telescope to peer into the Milky Way. Sometimes our photography is more related to astronomical phenomena, which I will give you examples of that later on, but two of the most popular are meteor showers, like one in August, the Perseids, or one in December, the Geminis, and the Northern Lights. I have seen Northern Lights in both hemispheres, from Antarctica all the way to Arctic area, in different countries. But this was the best Northern Lights I have ever experienced in Iceland. In 2015, I was doing my annual Aurora photo tour and workshop, which I do twice a year, in March and September. And a few of you are going to join me or have been already there. And I've had the great pleasure to see you again today. But in 2015, the group left, and 2 days after that, the storm arrived, unfortunately. But you can never really predict that. This was the most intense aurora storm in 15 years. And I was really fortunate to be there. We found a clear sky in the western part of the country. 2 in the morning, you see the result here. Very colorful aurora, not completely visible with these colors to the eyes. Usually you see the green. If it's more active, you see red as well. If it's really intense like this, you see purple, blue, and yellow as well. But not as vivid as the camera, of course, because this is a long exposure, and our eyes are almost color blinded at night until the intensity of light is enough to activate the cone cells. It has a lot of good memories, but the negative part of it, this image appeared on many publications, including the cover of National Geographic, a special edition. And after that, this place is so popular for nighttime photography. We took a group there last time. It was just no space for us in the middle of the night. So many tripods, and everybody is trying to illuminate the waterfall with massive LEDs, which I usually don't like, because light painting at nighttime, although it's fascinating to try it, but if you use very bright light, nobody else can do the photo anymore, we are using very high ISO. Also, it's going to damage the local wildlife. A lot of those animals are really sensitive to light, especially birds. A close-up picture of that area, because that was a very high-resolution image to show you this pastel of colors. Another active aurora which is dominated by green this time in Lapland. Only 2-second exposure. Using a fish eye exactly towards the zenith overhead, 10-second exposure. And if you take this shot a few seconds later, it's totally different. I think I have a video later, video here, which tells you how active aurora is moving when it's in storm level. This was one of the photo tours a couple of years ago. Other than meteor showers and aurora borealis or australis, solar eclipses are another great part of astrophotography and stargazing in general. We have a great total solar eclipse coming in December in Chile again. The last one was just in July, again in Chile and Argentina. So it's going to return to the same place. Every 1.5 years, on average, we have a total solar eclipse somewhere on the planet. But you have to travel in order to see them because the band is very narrow. That's the shadow of the moon touching the Earth. It's usually between 100 to 300 kilometers in wide and covering less than 1% of the Earth. At the same time, I was using a second camera for a close-up shot. This was in 2006, the picture you saw. Before that was in Indonesia with all the volcanoes under the shadow of the moon. Of all the phenomena I've captured, this was one of the most exciting to me, also surprising because I was not familiar with this phenomenon at the time. It was 2007. I was still in Iran and trying to photograph the new moon. So I was on a very high mountain called Dizin, not far from Tehran. 3,400 meters, the moon was gone, we were starting to pack, there were 3 of us. And all of a sudden, this diffuse star on the horizon next to Gemini, so the 2 stars of Gemini, that's Venus, started to grow, become higher, and very bright. It was so bright, it was casting shadow. And I was very puzzled because just a few nights ago, on the TV, I was talking to people about UFO does not exist. So I was going through the list of all the possibilities. So is this a comet, asteroid, and none of them really matched. So I called one of the guys I knew at the Iranian Space Agency. It was very new at that time. And he thought, no, we didn't have any experiment or anything, as far as I know. So I posted this image on a NASA-related website. And people were commenting, especially the satellite observers. And after 24 hours, we realized that it was a classified mission from the US, a spy satellite which had a failure, so it was not using all the fuel, and the extra fuel was dumped out to the space at an altitude of about 200 kilometers over the Middle East. And some guy in Iran captured that, reported back to NASA, so it was very After a while, I became interested in this topic, and I realized these are not that rare. If you are in a good location, especially near Russia, where more of these activities are done, you see many of them. So I put them all together. These are by different photographers. Like this one was back in Iran again. But look at this unusual shape in northern Lapland. This one northern Norway, but it was visible from Russia, from Finland, from Sweden. And people were really puzzled. You can imagine a farmer in northern Lapland looking at this at night sky. Almost like an illustration of wormhole. More of them. This could be an image in biology. Some of the images are, as I said, very abstract, and I photographed them specifically for fine art. So in National Geographic, we have a number of galleries across the US at the moment, from Hawaii all the way to Florida and New York. There are Nat Geo galleries, and I'm one of the contributing photographers. So when I take pictures, it's not necessarily about an environmental story. I love to do that, of course, but a certain percentage of the images are made for fine art. And this is one of them in May, in a moonlight night. This was another one, a two pictures related to each other, with one with a wide angle, and it shows you how technology developed, because we can see the Milky Way and lightning at the same time in a single shot from a very transparent sky on top of Haleakala. But the second camera shooting with the telephoto lens was making a time-lapse video of this supercell with the active cloud with a lot of lighting. And here we go. So this was the second image that was used by the fine art galleries. Speaking of lightning, there are many interesting phenomena related to that. They have different names: red sprite, blue jet, and all these could be captured by off-the-shelf camera. So I followed some of these events. Recently in May in Texas, I was invited to give a talk to Texas Star Party participants. And as I arrived, it was a storm. A Texas storm on the horizon, and everybody went to their tent to sleep. I realized I'm in perfect location, perfect night for this phenomenon. When the sky is clear, but the horizon is filled with a storm, then you can see something called red sprite. And try it, it's visible from Canada as well. It's visible from anywhere on the planet when you have a storm front about 100 to 200 kilometers away from you with clear sky above it. But it's challenging to capture because they're faint, they're very brief, fraction of a second. Look at this time-lapse video. So this is in full speed, so therefore they're very brief at the moment. See those flashes of red light? Then we can have a look at some of the still images taken from this time lapse, enhanced to show you the sprite property. This is light, the storm, and a nearby town, and Taurus here, and red sprites, they appear in all variety of shapes. Their science were completely unknown to us until the 1980s. Many people reported them, nobody believed, because they were not really photographed. Until it was accidentally photographed, and then there were a number of grants by NASA and other universities to explore them. They were sent over by high altitude jets, these experiments to monitor the sprites and realize how they're forming, because they're not around us, they're not at a few kilometers above us, they're about 50 to 60 kilometers above us. That's halfway to the space. Instead of lightning that goes to the ground, they're going upwards. And we don't call them lightning because they have a little physical difference. And this is the best I could capture that night. Probably the best red sprite I have ever photographed. Happened in May. Because I was using a telephoto lens, and I was lucky enough to arrange it in a way that one of the massive red sprites appear in the picture. And now we can have a look at that time-lapse video, but slowed down, so the sprites are more prominently visible. And I would say the sprite you see in this time-lapse video has a similar real-time appearance to the eye, because I have frozen the video on the scene of every sprite. Now they're appearing at the same time of another phenomenon. These bands you see here, they're air glow. Fireball in Atacama Desert. A lot of time photographers miss the fireball because it's somewhere else in the sky. But if you continue to shoot that area of the sky, the smoke of fireball will be visible to the camera, sometimes even to the eye. It's called the persistent meteor train. For those of you who are doing this, I'd like to share you this picture and need your help. If you can find any image of a meteor with this shape, please contact me. Meteors are believed to be in a strict, very straight line because they're small objects. The dynamic doesn't let them to go in a zigzag motion in the atmosphere, but in a number of my images, they appear in this shape. And I know a few others who have captured them. Some astronomers believe that my camera is shaking, and that's the reason. And I was suspicious about that because they were so short, so I checked all my images, and that's not correct because they are also visible with mirrorless cameras. The reason for shaking is the mirror going up and shaking the camera, but in a mirrorless camera, we don't have that. Comets, they're the mothers of any meteors. Most of the meteors are comet-related, some are asteroid-related, so these are icy bodies coming from far distances in the solar system to the inner parts where Earth and Sun is located. The best I've seen so far was Comet Hale-Bopp in '97. The last major comet we had was in 2007 in the southern hemisphere, so it's been quite a while without any major comet. And believe me, this is one of the best, most memorable things you can see in the night sky. But most of the comets that make news nowadays are these smaller ones, which are barely visible to the eye, but good still for a telephoto shot, like this one from Parkes Radio Telescope in Australia. Speaking of observatories, I've worked with many of them for astronomy outreach. One of them is Mount Wilson in California. This historic observatory is known for the discovery of expansion of the universe. About 100 years ago, Edwin Hubble used this telescope to discover that universe is not a single galaxy. They realized beyond Milky Way, many of these little clouds they see in the images are actually galaxies, some of them larger than the Milky Way. Second, they realized these galaxies are moving away from each other. So this is a very important observatory, but nowadays most of the observatory is dedicated to public observation. So you can rent it. Some astronomers, amateur astronomers come here as a group of 10, 20 and use one of the largest publicly available telescope on the planet to enjoy the night sky. A 60-inch and a 100-inch telescope. This is the view through the 100-inch telescope with very unusual image for an astrophotographer because I was not really there for photography, it was for another program. So I had no way of connecting the camera to the telescope. This is a handheld image. I was hand-holding my camera behind the eyepiece for 1/15 of a second. So the Orion Nebula is so bright through this telescope that you can capture a handheld image of the center of the Orion Nebula with all the colors. La Palma, Canary Island, where I visit every year for my master class, is another ideal location on the planet for observation or stargazing. It's known as European paradise for stargazing. This is the beginning of the night. Only a few minutes after sunset, I made a long exposure how the clouds are moving in this caldera. A bit later, the Milky Way is emerging out, and the telescopes are visible on top of the mountain. The highest observatory on the planet is ALMA. One of the two highest, I would say, 5,050 meters, and I was there a few days ago. This is from some years ago. looking towards the south celestial pole. So it's an exposure of about half an hour. During this half an hour, the Earth is rotating. Therefore, all the stars are moving. This is how we create the star trends. You just make a long exposure, especially towards the north in the northern hemisphere or south in the southern hemisphere. And as the Earth moves, all the stars are creating these parallel lines. This one is in Grand Canyon. The story here is not about the stars, not about the canyon, but the number of planes. All these lines are planes. It's impossible to make a proper star-shaped image, long exposure from some of the national parks in the US because they're exactly in this highway of planes. Until you wait for several hours in the night and shoot after midnight, then there are fewer planes passing above you. Relation to archaeology is very important for the World at Night project. This one is Portugal, in the area known as Alentejo, and there is a large dark sky area, Alqueva. If you're ever in Portugal, have a visit. It's not far from Lisbon, a few hours drive, and you're in one of the ideal stargazing locations. Anything related to UNESCO World Heritage Sites is of our interest because we are in connection with a program we have with Astronomy and World Heritage. The panel of petroglyph in central Iran, it's a valley called Teymare near the town of Ulhaygan. There are about 30,000 petroglyph sites. I would say this is the densest petroglyph area in the world I have heard of. Largely undiscovered, unfortunately also in danger of a new road which is passing in the middle of Teymare, and since many of them are not registered, they can be gone. And some of them are very unusual because petroglyph doesn't, it's not really known to be older than 12,000 years. There are very few petroglyphs older than that. And some of these are older because they're showing Ice Age animals, which are gone after the Ice Age in the Middle East. And one of them is right here. Just recently, I posted this image on National Geographic because there's an interesting story I found just recently. When I photographed this, it was one shot out of 400 in a time-lapse video. So I never realized there's something unusual in this picture. It's a petroglyph in the same area, not 17,000 years, but about 5,000, 6,000. You see Asiatic cheetah, which is very rare nowadays in Iran, a wolf, probably lion, a snow drought maybe, and some hunters coming in. But there's an actual animal, a live animal in this picture too. So let's have a closer look to the upper left. Do you see? Look. So this was a 20-second exposure. During this 20-second, this fox was very curious about the sound of clicking camera. I was not there. I was operating a second camera. So he came and checked the camera for a fraction of exposure and then left. That's why it's in a ghost light. The ghost fox. Not 100% sure it's a fox, but it looks like it. It can be a wolf. Some images are made for cultural connection. This one for a group in Brazil, they asked me to shoot the Southern Cross because Southern Cross appears on the flag of several nations in the Southern Hemisphere. The most prominent, of course, is Australia and New Zealand, but also in the flag of Brazil, the Southern Cross is there, and you can see it over here. This is a sugarcane farm, which are many of them available in Brazil, and you know this is a source of problem at the moment. So this picture has several stories, in fact, with the rainforest of Amazon on fire at the moment. One of the reasons is farming and ranching. So farmers are setting up the fires in order to get new land or larger land in the area. And this is how most of the rainforest is gone. But the second part of the story on the Southern Cross, the smallest constellation in the entire night sky, but the most iconic for the southern observers because these four stars has similar brightness. They're bright next to each other, so it's very eye-catching. And it's next to a dark nebula in the sky known as cul-de-sac. And here, where it is on Brazilian flag. Most astronomical flag you can find. Some images are made for planetariums, therefore we use fisheye lenses or panoramic projections, and we have made already one planetarium show, and it's quite a different lecture when I give a live talk inside planetariums because it's very immersive, and the images are very unusual to people at the first glance. A lot of Germans cannot recognize this landmark, which is probably the most famous castle in Germany. Because it's distorted in the fisheye view. This is Neuschwanstein in Bavaria, and has been one of the inspiration to Disney for the castles. I was there at 3 in the morning, and I had another address here. Not captured, but address from this guy here came to the window, turned on the light, and asked me what I'm doing there at 3 in the morning. I, of course, had to illegally jump over a barrier, the two of them in fact. Otherwise it was not possible to get close to the castle. But that's a very normal routine for us because these locations are not accessible at night. Yellowstone National Park, illuminated by a small LED, and Milky Way is behind. Same area, Grand Teton National Park in Wyoming. This picture really changed me. When I was a teenager, I received a book by Ansel Adams, and from all the images of Ansel Adams in this book, this one resonates for me for some reason. I can't really express that feeling, but I was a teenager back in Tehran, and I always had in mind I'd like to go to this place, Grand Teton, the Snake River, and repeat this iconic image by Adams in nighttime. So I managed to go there finally in 2013, but not in a normal night. I was very lucky. At the first, when we arrived, we were very disappointed by my colleague because this phenomenon known as air glow were very active. And air glow, when it's really active, you don't see many stars. It's a very high cloud at the edge of a space. It's colorful and it's very messy, so you don't see clear view of the Milky Way. But then I realized this is very rare, what we have seen. This is a very unusual activity. Because the folks at National Geographic art galleries have intensified the landscape, especially in this picture. Originally it was darker. But the patterns of air glow are really real. What you're seeing is completely real, and the colors are slightly intensified. And these are the galleries I mentioned. There are a couple of new ones too, I have not added to here. The moon set in an evening of Boston. And the story of this image is how we are disconnected from what is visible behind. Many people in these offices and apartments have no idea about the beauty of night sky because we are so busy with everything in city life. And we are completely disconnected because of this light pollution we have. Cut around here because there's some private things happening in the upper right. And when it's a small screen, I let it go, but in larger screen, I usually public privacy. So if you're living in one of these high apartments, remember there's this astrophotographer using his long telephoto from 10 miles away. Speaking of disconnection from the night sky, I always like to talk about light pollution because this is a major thing at the moment. Some people never heard about light pollution. It sounds very funny, light and pollution, yes. If we send light to the sky, it's going to disturb a lot of birds, insects, and it's going to affect human body, in fact. People who are in high exposure of especially white blue lights, intense white blue lights at nighttime, they have a sleep problem. And sleep cycle, when it's disrupted, you have a lot of problems inside the body. At the moment, there's established science that connects breast cancer with light pollution, not as the first contributor, but as one of the major ones. And this is not new. We know it almost for 10 years now, but there has not been enough cases to release that. 3 years ago, the American Medical Association finally officially announced that white blue LEDs are harmful to the human body and many other species. And thankfully, thanks to this report, in the US, the cities are not allowed to use LEDs of above 4,000 Kelvin temperature. And remember this, if you're using LEDs, LEDs are good as long as they're used with the correct temperature in the correct place. When you're in a surgery room, you don't want a yellow-red LED, of course. You want white blue in a medical doctor. But in your bedroom, you don't want white blue LED. In your bathroom, you don't want intense blue lights, because if you go in the middle of the night to that bathroom, you're not going to have an easy sleep after that. The blue light is going to trigger the brain that this is daylight because it resembles the blue sky. And as soon as that happens, the amount of melatonin in the body is going to reduce, and that activates the body. And it takes you longer to go back to sleep, or at the beginning of the night. So use 3,000 Kelvin or less inside your house. Also, it's best to use 3,000 or less in the cities, but unfortunately, most cities are not following that. They go to 4,000 because they're more energy efficient and they're cheaper. If you think about thousands of lives a city needs to buy, so it's a critical change. But now, it's unfortunately been too late for some areas. In East Asia, India, China, Japan, many of the major cities are already changed to white blue lights. In Korea, most of the Seoul is changed to white blue. And now we have the science, they have to reinvest again to change these things. Some countries like that for other reasons. For example, in India, some of the politicians talking about that people feel cooler with the white blue LED and they forget about the temperature of their city because the city might be very warm in the monsoon season, and because of white blue LEDs, the citizens are feeling better. I really don't buy that, but this is the policy and the idea. But this is a really serious thing. What you're looking at is not sunrise, it's not sunset, this is Las Vegas. And it's not from 10 miles away. This is from 90 miles away. So that means 140 kilometers away, 150 kilometers away, you're looking at Las Vegas in the long exposure. This is the glow you see. Now we're going in. I did a project for National Geographic recently, online article about light pollution. These are images made for that project. In this very wide-angle fisheye image, on the left of me is Las Vegas, 90 miles away. On the right side of me, that very scattered light is Los Angeles from 150 miles away. Much more yellow. And that shows Las Vegas is changing more towards LED because of all the billboards and advertisements that they have. Now we are 20 miles away from Las Vegas. The city skyline is visible, as well as this thing. The most intense ray on the planet, and it's there every night, at least for 5 hours per night, sometimes the whole night, for the past 30 years. Some people, when I posted this with some complaint that this light could be reduced or turned off, because there is no reason, there is no logical reason for this. It's a casino, and it's just the light coming from a casino is going to the space, resembling the spirit of ancient Egyptians going to the sky, in the middle of us. I can imagine I can understand this is a character of the city, but it's not really a good reason to disturb so many animals. And some people, after publishing this, told me that Las Vegas is in the middle of the desert, there is no bird or bats here, and this is very wrong. And I have documented it. Now we are in the city, on top of that major tower, and now we are next to Luxor Hotel. Let's have a closer look in this video. So you can see all the bats and insects trapped by the light. So it's a whole new ecosystem of itself. Thousands of bats are flying during the night. There are millions of insects living there, and many of the migrating birds are captured by these lights. Any bright lights you send up to the sky, the migrating birds are using light in the sky and landmarks on the ground for their migration path, especially the stars. So these lights collect them, they bring them to the cities, and they die during the daytime because they're completely lost. Some of them die by direct impact, but most of them die later on. In the city of Toronto, actually, the story started here in the 90s. People realized that many birds are falling off from high towers here, and they were collected by environmentalists the next day. Some of them in the seasons of migration, just on a single tower, it was up to 5,000 dead birds. So over the time, they realized this is because of the lights. These towers are shining. The birds are captured in nighttime, and then they die in daytime. Many of them by just going to the glass because they couldn't see the glass. They realized these are all migrating birds, not local birds. The same thing happened in Chicago, later on in New York City, and it took us quite a while until we realized billions of birds already died by light pollution, and it continues at the moment. Because light pollution is not really taken seriously. More like a fine art picture, a long exposure of a bat, 4-second bat flying through the rays coming out from Luxor Hotel. By the way, these rays, the lights inside, are enough to turn on at least 2 major hospitals or a small town, complete town. And it's not the only one. Here in Sydney, Australia, these are birds captured by light coming out from Sydney Opera House. 8-second exposure by my colleague Ajay Talwar. So I highly recommend you to just Google Nat Geo light pollution and you will find this article. Our nights are getting brighter, Earth is paying the price. It's on Nat Geo website, and it's very comprehensive. You can get a lot of ideas of how and what dimension light pollution is affecting us. So I try to reflect that story time to time on Nat Geo social media, especially Instagram, where I post once or twice a week, like this one recently, and this is another one in Dubai. The city of lights, but not really for a major reason, because this city has not that high amount of population, but a lot of lights, because these towers are advertising themselves to sell. These towers are mostly empty, so they're advertising to sell for new residents, and that's why sky is completely gone. I was addressed to it by police. They were asking for a special permission not exactly this location, but near the coast. You need a special permission to shoot at night in Dubai with a tripod. But nobody knows where you can get this permission. Beijing, the lights in Olympics Park is completely blue LED. This village in Thailand, well, my colleague Jeff Dai from China, he has been to this place a few times, and it was completely yellow, soft light a few years ago, now totally changed to blue LEDs. Very intense. This is how light pollution has changed in Europe over 20 years. You can find many notable things like Nile River, Cairo, Madrid, or here Rome, down up there, Paris, many of the major cities. Some of these are not cities in the middle of Africa. These are gas refineries, the flames coming out. The best person who can see these is an astronaut from space. And my friend, Don Petit, has done a number of these time-lapse. He was a pioneer for time-lapse videos made from the space station. When he went up there first time in 2001, he started using the available cameras to shoot time-lapse of the Earth moving underneath and the sky above. Because he's also an astrophotographer, hobbies, he had an eye for anything in the night sky. And out of many thousands of images captured there by Don and other astronauts, this is perhaps one of my favorites. Why? Because you're not looking at an island here. This is not an island. This is a country. And that's a border with another country. This country is regarded as a paradise for astrophotographers because they turn off the lights a few hours after sunset and the whole country becomes dark. And you have no other option, of course. So it's a paradise for astrophotographers with one-way ticket. It's North Korea. Oh, it's on the positive side. They save a lot of energy, in fact, by doing that. And you can compare the two capitals. And the border is heavily illuminated. And up here, we have the air glow. That's the air glow I photographed from the ground. It's always visible from the space as well as the outer edge of the main part of Earth's atmosphere. Back to the Earth in the darkest sky area as we get close to the end, you see the stargazing program we have in Maine. This is a single exposure of 45 minutes by a digital camera at very low ISO, ISO 64, for those of you who are practicing this. Might be interesting that you can try very low ISO at night time too. And these are red lights. We use red lights at night to keep our night vision. If you use white blue, it's going to disturb your eye and you don't see that much. Saying that, all the cars that are now using the white blue LEDs or xenon lights, these are very harmful to the environment, but more, it's a huge risk to the other drivers. And I think in a few years, this would be a crime. But at the moment, nobody cares about that because people who have made eye surgeries, LASIK surgeries, or any older person above 50 or 60 years, this light is going to create a glare. And this glare lasts about 1 second, 2 seconds, depending on the person and the angle. And imagine for 1 or 2 seconds in the middle of a highway, you don't see anything. That can cause an accident. And these lights are becoming brighter and more popular at the moment. So I wonder when exactly people are going to realize that white blue LEDs on the highways can be really risky to other drivers. And to yourself as well. Why? Because when you have a very intense white blue light, you don't see the shadows anymore. The shadow becomes pitch black. With the yellow light, you see the light illuminated, you see the shadow as well. So since we're in Canada, let me give you a very proper example. So you're driving on a highway in a remote area in northern Toronto, there is a moose coming. And you don't see anything of that moose when you're using white blue light until it's on the road. You're using a yellow light, you see that in the shadow, because your eye can see the shadow and illuminated area together. So is this against safety? Yes, especially in this area, or in northern US, where you have these huge animals walking to the road. Back to the stargazing, this is a typical night for me, shooting the night sky when I'm attending one of these programs together with a number of other people. I made some portraits during the self-portrait. Long exposure around Polaris with Mount Damavand in Iran in a winter night, Haraz Road, Atacama Desert, and you will find plenty of these images by me and other colleagues in Tuan Group on our website. Our website is famous for the oldest looking website in the world. But we like to keep this design for some reason. Usually I show this static of Tuan visitors. We have a very international visitors, but because of this guy here, or this girl, I don't know, this person visiting Tuan website since the beginning, I don't know if it's a systematic error. There's a group of 200 scientists in this island called Kerguelen. Actually, I was there on the way to Antarctica in 2003 to meet the real residents there, who are penguins. I'm looking for our friends, probably this guy, visiting Tuan website today. The brown ones are the chicks, 3 months here, 3 months old, and it's a colony of king penguin. So this is the last slide, and the news I'd like to share with you. In November, there will be a book written by me and photographers of Tuan. I have about 20%, 30% of the book images, and the rest by my colleagues from around the world. I can honestly claim this is the best collection of night sky photos in this style ever published, because we have spent a lot of time fine-tuning the collection and the stories behind, and I'm very glad this long waiting project is finally coming to life. You can pre-order now. It helps us to better estimate for the next print run with the publisher, or you can wait until the release in November. And I hope to return to Toronto for another talk with book signing after the book is out. We had the Word of Night book before, but never in English. It was in German, Dutch, Japanese, Korean, but never in English. We waited for a long time to find a proper publisher, and finally I'm happy to be successful with that this year. And this is the last picture, and it's also a single exposure where I have illuminated myself for 3 times. It was for a story related to a documentary on Nat Geo, where human, many thousands of years from now, have managed to scan all the brains and upload it to a cloud. So you can download yourself to different bodies in different time. Imagine. Could be a very different life, but you could live at the same time in 3 different bodies in 3 different times. Of course, not physically, but through a cloud. But that could be possible in the future. And we become all eternal, in a way. Thank you.